Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to WHIMS, and today I'm going to give you my review for the 2024 film Nosferatu, written for the screen and directed by Robert Eggers. Now, before I get into my review of the 2024 film proper, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts and the actual history of Nosferatu, because this film has existed long before even cinema has existed. Like this story, well, it was actually one of the first horror films officially to grace cinema screens. In fact, the very first Nosferatu film was originally slated to be an adaptation of Dracula, but because W.F.W. Murnau couldn't get the rights to the Dracula novel, he ended up making his own version. But when that film was released, even though he changed a couple of names and changed its key location, Bram Stoker's widow was outraged and declared that every copy of the film be banned, and she basically wanted every single copy of the film destroyed, and only a few copies of the film survived to this very day. In fact, only one copy actually survives that was in circulation, that is the definitive version that we all see in the public domain effectively. So there's a version of it on YouTube that's sort of got this great, wonderful blue and green and sort of like yellowy colour palette, and there's a couple of other versions that do have, just the plain black and white. But it does a very good job of establishing atmosphere, and it was one of the key horror films in the sort of German expressionist movement, where they would have sort of distorted angles and a lot of use of silhouettes. And there's actually a very famous image of a vampire sort of, walking up the stairs with his claw out as he's sort of, ascending the stairs to his victim's room. That's a very iconic image in sort of German expressionism. And then, of course, there's that shot, that contrast shot where it sort of like shows the cockerel crowing, and you just sort of see the vampire sort of look up. That trick as the vampire sort of looking up, Count Orlock looking up into the camera, almost looking right at you. And it's a really good contrast shot where it just goes from that wonderful shot of the cockerel to just that brief cut of that very ghastly image of Count Orlock sort of leaning down over a woman sort of drinking her blood. It's such a good shot, it's such a good snapshot that really gets you into that mood. But it's a really good film. I'd highly recommend you watch it if you're a huge film fan. And even though it's a silent film and it's in black and white, it does deserve to be watched because it really is a great film about atmosphere, and it's a great mood piece, but it's also a really wonderful just piece of cinema history as well. So it's a really wonderful film. And there have been other versions of this. There has been another version of Nosferatu, and there has been a film about the actor who played Nosferatu, Count Orlock, called Matt Schreck, where it basically kind of plays with the idea of, is he a vampire? Isn't he really a vampire? Because apparently he did so well in the film that people actually thought for a long time he actually went full method. He stayed in a very creepy castle for the duration of the filming, and it really is one of those things where people were starting to speculate, is he actually a vampire in real life, or is he just basically so involved in the part that he actually made people convinced that he was a vampire? And it's actually a really good urban legend. There was actually a film that was made about that called, I think it's called Kiss of the Vampire, which is really good. And it was directed by Werner Herzog. And it's a really good film. It's really funny, very tongue-in-cheek as well. But it's a really good vampire film, and it's really a lot of fun, really. It's basically like Vampire's Kiss, but without Nicolas Cage, hamming it up effectively. And it's really good. But this film is directed by Robert Eggers, and I have to admit I've only seen one other film of his, and I actually do feel kind of bad because now I want to check out everything he's ever done. I want to check out, I want to check out The Northman and The Lighthouse, but I have seen The Witch, and I love The Witch. It's such a good film. But this is basically his film as well. He was planning on making this film, and it's actually one of the only films he's made where it doesn't have "the" in the title. So he has one word. It's Nosferatu, and apparently he wanted to make this film for ages. In fact, he wanted to make it as soon as he'd finished production on The Witch. Like, he was making plans to do a remake of Nosferatu, but for the longest time he wanted to basically do it, but through ambition and saying that I've got so many other stories to tell first, that I want to get off my chest first, that I want to leave, Nosferatu for a rainy day, he decided to delay production on this film and go off and do The Northman and The Lighthouse. But now that he's finally done it, I have to say, this was my most anticipated film of the year. Like, honestly, this film, as soon as I saw the trailer, when it got to October time, and I went with my friend Bradley and my friend Alex to the Omniplex for, a movie day or movie night when we would watch a thriller or we'd watch an action film, or even just, something like Transformers 1, we would have a trailer for this film in front of it, and I'd be like, guys, we have to see this when this comes out, that we have to see it. It's one of those things. The thing that really got me going, really, because I love gothic horror, and when I saw the shot of Count Orlock's hand in silhouette, like, going over the city, I thought, this gave me huge Bram Stoker's Dracula vibes. So I said, I really need to see this film. I need to see it now. I need to literally pressure the film studios to release it early so that I can see a copy of it. But yeah, I was so excited. I was literally fan geeking out to an insane degree. I was like a teenager at a One Direction concert when I saw the trailer for this. Like, it was really kind of exciting. I was ecstatic. And when I finally saw it, I loved it. And it's a film that it is an adaptation of Dracula, but when you first watch the film, it's actually kind of strange because it's set in Germany and it's set during the 1800s. And the names are different. In this version, Jonathan Harker is named Thomas Hutter, and instead of Mina, it's Ellen Hutter. And Ellen Hutter has a little bit of a secret, and what the secret essentially is she seems to have a psychic connection to something that is otherworldly, something not of this world, something supernatural. But she doesn't know quite what it is. Well, she knows what it is, but she's kind of almost repressed it in a way. And this is one of the things that I really do like about the film, and what this film really kind of pinpoints, which is the idea of repression in society, especially the act of feminine sexuality in society. Because what I really like is that Elaine constantly tells her friend throughout the course of the film that she's experiencing these very strange emotions, and she's feeling a distance from Thomas, because Thomas is basically, like in the original Dracula story and in Nosferatu, he essentially goes over to the Carpathias to tie up some business with this very eccentric count, who in this version is called Orlock. And what I really like is Elaine is trying to tell her friends that she feels these desires. She feels these very repressed desires. She feels like something is taking over her, and she feels like she's losing control. And her friend goes, "You shouldn't talk about such things, Elaine. It's not proper. It's not. It simply isn't done," and things like that. It's very interesting because it's essentially having this almost like message where it's almost like it's not okay to talk about sex in public. It's not okay to talk about sex with your friends, all these desires that you might be feeling. And I thought that was very interesting because there is a lot of sexual imagery in this film. Like, even the scene where she is possessed for the very first time, she is almost like gyrating and almost like having fits and seizures, almost like she's, experiencing something that's very otherworldly and very kind of almost like it's almost like mock sexual almost. It's very bizarre. And I like how when Thomas Hutter meets the Count for the very first time, he genuinely is very terrified, or he's very put off by the Count, but he doesn't know quite why. And I really do like the fact that for a good chunk of this film, you don't see the Count. You don't see what he looks like. You only see him in silhouette, and it's usually in far away. Like, it's usually in a distance. And you almost like see like the outline of the fireplace or something like that. You never fully see him up close. You never see his full visage. And I kind of think that was a brilliant idea on the part of Robert Eggers, because for one thing, he wanted to surprise us, like give us an impression that, who's playing the Count in this version. But what I really like is it's done almost deliberately, because it's almost like the Count is an entity that's akin to a nightmare, almost like Freddy Krueger or something like that, where he doesn't feel real. Like, he doesn't feel like a real apparition. And what I really like is when he first bites Thomas, going headlong into the thick of the drama here, it's almost like a very sexual act. Like, the idea of him basically, because he doesn't bite him on the neck, which is the very classical way in which vampires make their mark. He bites him on the chest, and he bites him on a very, intimate part of his chest. And it's like, it's almost sexual. And what I really like about it is Thomas, when he sees the bite mark in the mirror, he feels very freaked out. But he almost feels, it's almost like a double-edged panic, because he feels obviously violated. The idea of, being bitten in your sleep is something that's very quite horrifying. And the fact that you don't know what your host looks like and all the rest of it, that's terrifying. But what also is really quite terrifying is it's almost like he's afraid of admitting that he actually kind of enjoyed it as well. Like he almost felt like, oh, he could have had this almost sexual awakening almost when that happened to him. And that's why when you see Nicholas Hoult having like beads of sweat on his face, it's almost like he doesn't want to admit that he could have enjoyed it too. And I really do like the almost sexual undertones in this film. And this isn't the only film that I've covered recently that has a lot of sex in it, but except in this version, it's more subtext as well as the actual text almost. So it's really quite interesting. But I just really loved the way this film kind of tackled sexuality in this, because I really do think it's really interesting. And of course the performances in this is fantastic. I like the fact that Herr Nock, who is the head of the property development firm that Thomas works for, he is actually this film's Renfield. And I love the first scene. After we see him in his lawyer's gear, he's almost like kneeling down, naked, in front of like a pentagram, and he's saying, "I have given him to you, my master. I have fulfilled my contract to you," and things like that. And I love the fact that he's very kind of almost grandiose, and it feels very Robert Eggers, like very stark lighting, very kind of, very bizarre, provocative imagery, like a guy naked in front of a pentagram. Like it feels very much like The Witch. And it's very kind of almost, it's very creepy, but it's very inviting as well. It manages to really draw you in a way that very few filmmakers can, usually with horror anyway as well. And I like the fact that with this film, you don't see any kind of, natural lighting. You don't feel that when characters are lit in a room, you don't feel like it's natural lighting. You feel like it's like, oh, when you have a character lighting a lantern, that's your only light in the entire film. Or when you see characters in a room during the day, it's a very pale landscape. So you sort of see, the only light source you see is the light through the windows, and it's a very pale look. So it gives this almost idea of these characters are dying, almost like they're almost dead inside. And I like that idea, especially when it comes to filming characters or actresses or actors like Lily Rose Depp, where she literally feels like she's gradually being taken over and she's falling ill to this sickness that she's experiencing. And I really like that. I like the fact that they could have almost used lighting to their advantage to recreate a sense of mood and atmosphere, as opposed to just basically saying, oh, we're just going to do it because we don't have the money to do it or whatever. It's very well done. And I really do like, and this is something that Robert Eggers has done with The Witch, where he kind of almost wants to go for authenticity. He doesn't want to go for natural studio lighting. Even if they gave him the money to light the sets correctly, he'd say, no, it doesn't feel good doing it with all this studio lighting. We need to make it look authentic as possible. And it's really well done. I really love it for that reason. And I like the fact that when characters are introduced to the Count, when Thomas is first introduced to the Count, there's a huge build up to this. Like when he basically goes into the village that's next door to the castle, everyone's like saying, oh, here's a foreigner, go back where you came from, foreigner, we don't need your kind here, and things like that. And they're saying this to Thomas. Thomas is the outsider who's coming in and wants to just get this over with as quick as possible, but all the locals of this village are saying, we don't want your kind here, we don't want your kind, messing up our landscape and ruining, everything for us. And it almost is like this idea of, yes, that there is almost like this very kind of open bigotry in the film as well. But this is coming from the villagers in the castle that are saying, we don't want you to go up to the castle because there is an evil there and we have a covenant with him. And what I really like about it is they use the word covenant, which is the idea of we give him sacrifices and he leaves us alone. So that's kind of what he does. Whereas when this foreigner comes in, they're worried that he's going to mess everything up. He's going to break the covenant that they had with him. Like, you give me a sacrifice and I leave you alone kind of thing. And they actually do give a lot of sacrifices throughout the course of the first half of this film, because there is a scene where they literally have a maiden ride a horse with some of the villagers via torchlight, naked, and she's just basically on this horse, and they're literally taking her up to the castle to be sacrificed to this unholy creature. And I just really think that's quite interesting, because again, the word covenant is used throughout the course of the story, like the contract as well. Like when Herr Nock says the word, I have fulfilled my contract with you, it's the idea that he's basically sold his soul to the devil so that he could essentially get more blood, and blood in the case of Dracula, in the Dracula novel, the word blood is lives is often, given a lot of insight and a lot of underlining emphasis. And in the case of this, it's the same thing, because Hairnock is essentially like the Renfield of this story, where he essentially, in return for his fulfilling his contract, he basically gets given lives. And he doesn't just eat bugs in this version either, he actually eats a lot of creatures. He eats a bird. He actually eats a bird live on camera at one point. Like, I was actually quite shocked at that. Like 1 minute he's like stroking this bird, and he's like, "I know my master will come to me soon." And the next minute he's like, biting into this, pigeon, like a bit of fried chicken almost. It's really quite dark and disturbing, but I really just loved it. All the close-ups, the blood on the walls in his cell. It was all there. It really made me feel icky, but I also felt like I'm just loving this, and I just really love the authenticity. And I love the fact that all the actors just look really intense in this as well. Like, Nicholas Hoult feels intense. Even Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who plays a much more side character in this role, he gives one of his best performances in this, because he's a guy who essentially is very kind of prim and proper. Like, he's saying to his wife, like, we don't talk about such things when it comes to things like desire and bloodshed and these damn beasts that are coming out. He doesn't believe in that. He doesn't believe in that. He believes in God. He believes in, his religion, his faith. He believes in his family as well, and looking after his family and what's best for his family. But he's almost like the token skeptic in these sorts of films. But in many ways, it's important, because that's what he's been raised to believe. So when he does get opportunities to be intimate with his wife, you do feel that sense of he's finally letting go. He's finally free. And I love that moment where they're chatting, and he goes, "It's just not becoming of a woman to talk of such things in public." And then all of a sudden he turns to his wife, and he's being very intimate with her, and they're making out. It's very much like, what people would do now. If they were showing love scenes now, where they'd be very intimate and very kind of, hands-on, as it were. But what's very interesting is that he does that while she's far away, like while she's out of earshot. And it's almost like women can't talk about sexuality, but if a man wants to be very intimate with his wife, he's going to be intimate because he feels like he's earned it almost. So they do a very interesting thing with sexuality in this film that's really quite wonderfully portrayed. It is quite disturbing as well, because the scene where Thomas Hutter is first being bitten, where it shows Orlock kind of like over him and taking a bite out of him and drinking his blood. It's almost like he's humping him almost. Like, it feels very kind of sexual and very kind of, homoerotic almost. And it's just wonderful. I thought that was very kind of clever and very well done. And I'd say to myself, I'd love to have that happen to me, but if it was someone like Bill Skarsgård, for instance, the actor playing Orlock, I'd happily have him do that to me, but Orlock himself, no way. That kind of thing. But yeah, I really do like this film. It was very compelling. It was very well shot. It's another masterpiece by Robert Eggers, as far as I'm concerned. It's a fantastic piece of modern day horror. And I like the fact that when this film was made, I feel that Robert Eggers did a very good job of giving you very little. Because what's very interesting, especially with the way the castle scenes were done, I felt like when he meets Orlock, or in the build-up to meeting Orlock, there's this wonderful shot where he's in the forest, and the snow's falling, and you have this far away shot where you can see something approaching, and it kind of cuts to his reaction, and then cuts to the carriage drawing closer, and then you just sort of stay on the carriage as it's drawing nearer. And there's something about that feels very dreamlike, and it feels very kind of almost like a fairy tale with how it, establishes itself. But it's a really beautiful shot, and it's really drawn out. And there's this wonderful shot that I have to mention in this review that I just really fell in love with, that really added to the dread, was a scene where Thomas Hutter is alone in the room after Orlock's gone to bed or left the room, and the fire's going, and then all of a sudden you see, Thomas's reaction, and then the camera pans to like a dark passageway, and it just stops dead. And I really like the fact that he did that, because that really kind of almost escalates the dread that you're feeling, and it's very well done. And when you actually see what Orlock looks like, it's fabulous. I love the way he looks, because he doesn't look like the original Count Orlock at all. He looks very different, like he's got a bit of a beard as well, and I like the fact that he actually does have a voice. He has a voice very much akin to Gary Oldman, in Bram Stoker's Dracula, like, his voice feels very kind of like this, and he speaks a lot with his throat almost, and it's really beautifully done. And I really do feel like his performance is fantastic and really beautiful. And I just really think his performance is worth the price of admission alone, because he really does a good job. And I sadly found out who Count Orlock was before I saw the film, because people like to say, oh, Bill Skarsgård's in this, and he's with, Nicholas Hoult, or he's with Lily Rose Depp, or with Willem Dafoe. And I just thought, I really wish they didn't show us any promotional material for this film, because I'd have really loved to have figured out who Orlock was just by his voice and all the rest of it. But Bill Skarsgård's in this. Who else is he going to play outside of, possibly Thomas Hutter? There's no other person he could potentially be. So why is he in this? Oh, he's Orlock, obviously, because he played Pennywise in It Part 1 and Part 2. So obviously he's going to play the monster in this one if he's playing no one else. So it really just could have felt like spoiler alert whenever I saw the promotional materials. But I just really loved how they tried to build up the mystery, so that when you did see him, it actually really did kind of feel even more terrifying, because that final shot, which is very iconic in the original Nosferatu, where they say, by the first crow of the cock, the sun will rise and he will burst into flames. And I love how that's almost written into the folklore of this film, that has to happen in order to stop Nosferatu. And I really like that, because the way it's handled is beautifully done, because Ellen says, when she talks to Thomas about what she's feeling, about all these visions that she's seeing, and all these experiences that she's experiencing, and almost this very repressed desire that she feels, she describes Orlock as her sin. And I really like that, because it almost it's almost like they're doing the Nosferatu thing, and kind of almost doing it as a metaphor for abusive relationships, or sort of like a metaphor for toxic relationships, because she experiences being with him before, being with him in a previous life, and the idea of he was so cruel and so vengeful and so bloodthirsty, and he told me of how you behaved when he entered you and he slithered into you like a snake and things like that. So I really do like the fact that there's very blatant sexual language in this film, like the idea of she basically describing him being inside her head as almost like him slithering inside her like a snake. And I really like that. There's very blatant sexual imagery, and there's obviously very blatant imagery of temptation, obviously referring to the snake. But I really do like those ideas, and of course I have to give special mention to Lily Rose Depp, because this is one of her best performances, because I feel like there's a scene where she's having an argument with a character, and she really just lets loose, and she lets all her emotions out, and she says, this is how I'm feeling frustrated for you, I'm feeling frustrated for my friend, and I'm feeling frustrated for the children that both you and she bore, and I want you to see that this is real, what's happening to both of us is real. And there's another performance that she has opposite Nicholas Hoult, where she basically gets so emotional that she literally goes into like a seizure-like state. And I have to give tremendous applause for Lily Rose Depp, because this is a very brave performance to do, because it could have very easily... It's almost like Isabella Adjani in the film Possession, where it feels like it could almost come across as comical with how it's done, but because she trusts her director immensely, and the director has complete and utter faith in the material and the things that he's done with it, it almost feels like a perfect thing. Where Isabella Adjani in Possession, I'm talking about the breakdown in the subway scene, which I mentioned in my review to great length, where it's almost like a metaphor. It's almost like a metaphor, but then there's a literal miscarriage that happens there. In this one, it's almost akin to that, where it feels like she's literally throwing everything at the wall and seeing how she can do it, how she can, really portray the physicality of what it means to be taken over. And it's not goofy, but she doesn't do the stereotypical. And what I really love about this film is it doesn't go into Hollywood conventions either. He recreates his own voice when it comes to this as well, Robert Eggers. He does a very good job of establishing his own voice with these horror films, and he isn't just simply saying that, oh, let's rip off The Exorcist by having limbs twitch and break and twist and congeal and, have these almost, these very almost, breaking bone type, possession scenes. Let's make this possession scene feel really haunting. Let's have her eyes roll at the back of her head, let the foam come out of her mouth and things like that. But let's just keep it very kind of almost, very animalistic, very primal, but let's not have any twitching limbs or anything like that, or breaking shoulder blades or whatever, or cracking shoulder blades, none of that stuff. Just have it be like, the actors just emoting, and it's just really well done, and it's just a really beautiful performance, and it's a really fantastic story, because I really do think Nosferatu is one of those stories which very easily could have been forgotten, but because of the love people have for this film, and because of the love that film historians and film film experts and film critics love this film so much and consider it such a huge part of popular culture, horror popular culture, it's wonderful to see that it still lives and survives, and that people like Robert Eggers have actually, done their work and actually decided to do their own version of it, but not rip it off completely. Use bits and pieces here and there and not rip off, but recreate iconic scenes from the original film, but then also kind of do his own spin on it. Like the scene at the end where Elaine decides of her own free will, and this is what I like, is that she has complete agency during this final act, because honestly, this could have very easily been seen. If this was handled badly, this would upset many a member of the audience, many a feminist. But what I really like about this film is Elaine gets back her agency in the scene where she feels like she's being mostly taken over and mostly taken advantage of by Orlock. It's a very powerful and inspiring moment that she basically decides of her own free will, I'm going to lie down in my bed and I'm going to make sure that I have complete control, even though I'm asleep, and I'm going to let this bastard drain me of my blood. I'm going to have complete control. I'm going to go to bed just as just as the early hours of the morning are setting in, and when we burn his bones and we burn the earth from his homeland, Orlock and Thomas Hutter and all these other characters are going off to burn the crypt and the coffin. I'm going to be here sleeping, but I'm going to make sure I have complete control, and I'm going to get back the body that he stole from me. And I really like that idea, the idea that she decides to, of her own free will, let this man take her, but he's not going to let her take her. She's going to go out of her own free will. And when that scene happens where he's draining her of her blood, and he sort of looks up and he sees that the sunlight is approaching over the horizon, and you see him in full visage, it's actually a really moving scene, because she even holds on to him at one point, that she's saying, you're not going anywhere, you're not flying off into the sunset, you're not going back to your coffin, you're staying right here with me and we're going to meet the sun together. And it's such a wonderfully dark, macabre moment, and it's just beautiful, because in the original, all Count Orlock does, he basically drains the woman of her blood, and then immediately it's like he bursts into flames, but then the woman's completely fine. She doesn't think to herself, oh, I've been bitten or anything like that. She completely actually feels liberated and free. And when you have Robert Eggers adapting something like that, you can't just have it end happily ever after. You've got to make it be cryptic. And it is really sad, because you do feel like she's gone through so much throughout the course of this story, Elaine. But then after the final reveal, you do feel a sense of, you feel like even though they've won, they've still lost something, and they've lost so much. Like Aaron Taylor Johnson's character loses so much because he wants to believe in the institutions that he was raised in. He wants to believe that there is no such thing as ghosts or vampires or anything like that. But then he realises that Orlock wants Elaine, and Elaine is kind of almost made a pledge to Count Orlock. I want to say Dracula, but his real name's Orlock. But he makes a pledge to Orlock that after 3 nights, she will be his. And in the meantime, he's going to create a lot of blood and carnage in her wake. And it's such an incredible story. I don't want to give too much away, but I really do feel like this film is just a really fabulous retelling of a classic story. And I just think, if you haven't seen it already, please do. But I really do hope that more people see this and more people really appreciate what a labour of love this film was for Robert Eggers. And what's really wonderful is I loved looking this up on Wikipedia. When it talked about the development of the film, it actually made reference to the fact that he made a school play version of Nosferatu in high school. So I really do like the fact that he loved this film so much that he wanted to do his own version even back then, even as a play. That felt very inspiring to me, that he really felt such a passion for this story and this iteration of Dracula. And it's so good. I would try to recommend people watch it. And if you just really love very gothic horror stories where it embraces the gothic like me and you just want to see the atmosphere and just the beauty of the macabre, this film will most definitely scratch every itch going there. But what I really like about this film is it's really, hyper sexual, but it's not too overly sexual, which I like. It's not like Caligula, where there was a lot of, nudity and a lot of sex, like in the last review I did. It is mostly, it's mostly implied, but then there's also stuff that you can read into it as well, which I really do like. But it's a really good film, very atmospheric, very kind of, beautifully shot and very beautifully done. And I just hope a lot of people will go and watch it because it's a really fabulous story. And I've been waiting ages to see it, and I wanted you guys to hear my thoughts first. But yeah, that's my review for Nosferatu 2024 and a little bit of a mini review for the Symphony of Horror version of 1922's Nosferatu as well. So I hope you enjoyed both reviews and stay tuned for my IMDb's greatest films of all time list entry. I'm going to be doing a couple of other entries that I've skipped over. Well, not skipped over, but I've kind of left hanging. I'm going to do those reviews first. And then I'm going to do my friend Christian's request to review number 90, which is the film Come and See. So stay tuned for those entries, but I hope you enjoyed this review. If you like this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to see more, please let me know down in the comments, and please subscribe. And if you let me know your thoughts about this film in the review in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this film. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Why didn't you enjoy it? If you didn't enjoy it, have you seen any other Robert Eggers films? And which one should I watch after this? Because honestly, I'm really intrigued after seeing both The Witch and Nosferatu. I want to see what this guy does next. So I hope you enjoyed this film. It's been Josh with WHIMS. I hope you're having a very good day. Sorry if you can hear barking in the background. My puppy Flo is outside having a little run around. And she's also keeping very, very quiet for, her master to be, recording this video. So I hope you're all good and my covenant is fulfilled. So I hope you're all having a good day. Take care. Bye for now.